badly. And I supported Hillary Clinton. A lot of my friends worked for her, and I was devastated when she lost.
Well, wait a second. We have news here. Jim Comey was the director of the FBI working for President Donald Trump. A bunch of his wife's friends worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Virtually his entire family marched against his boss on Trump's very first day of work. Comey gave ABC photographs of all of them carrying anti-Trump signs on the National Mall. We're not supposed to think that any of this had any effect on how Jim Comey approached his job in the Trump administration. But of course it did. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight. So, Mark, Jim Comey tells us that he hates dishonesty, though Jim Clapper is his hero in the civil service. And then he says, when asked, well, why do you think Attorney General Loretta Lynch commanded you not to describe the criminal investigation into Hillary as a criminal investigation? He goes, I don't know. Just no idea. It didn't seem political to me. I mean, that's false.
Yeah, it is false. The circumstantial evidence that's staring you in the face when it comes to Democrat behavior, he professes to be blank about, but he'll happily, deliriously speculate on what Trump may have been doing with a bunch of prostitutes in Moscow. This is, basically fans of James Comey want it both ways, Tucker. I was listening to that bit about his wife and daughters marching in the Women's March the day after Trump's inauguration. On the one hand, we're told that James Comey is a straight shooter, a straight arrow, a Boy Scout. He's a nonpartisan civil servant. He's a straight shooting G-man. And on the other hand, his entire family is marching in this Women's March. I believe something like 4 million people marched across America. So out of the female population of the United States, that's about 2.5%. So it's not just that Mrs. Comey is a Hillary voter. It's that she's in the hardest hardcore of Hillary partisans. His number 2 at the FBI, Andrew McCabe, his wife is a Democrat candidate in Virginia. Again, it's not that, these are just people who pick candidate A or candidate B. They're in the hardest hardcore of partisans. And Comey and McCabe's tenure at the FBI was marked by a bizarre, grotesque partisanship that is far closer to obstruction of justice. If you look at the way Lynch behaved, McCabe behaved, Comey behaved, Strzok behaved, Page behaved, is far closer to real obstruction of justice than Trump is supposedly being investigated for.
So if you were starting a new job and your wife said to you, look, I really don't like your boss, and you might say, I don't really like him either, or whatever. No, I really don't like him. I want to go march with a sign denouncing him on the National Mall on his first day of work. Yeah. Would you say, maybe just for the sake of appearances, it is my boss after all, and my job requires me to have no political affiliation, maybe just kind of pull back on the public display of that a little bit? Or is that too much to ask in a marriage, do you think?
No, I think there's a difference to this. If you're the editor of Mother Jones, or even the editor of National Review, and the missus wants to march in the Women's March, I think that's fair enough. If they want to march in an anti-Tucker Carlson march or an anti-Mark Steyn march, I'm fine with that. But I think when you're a civil servant, particularly in law enforcement, then the Caesar's wife standard applies. And it's actually the only reason we're mired continuously in this ridiculous world of lawyers and legalisms and attorney-client privilege and lawsuits is because nobody understands. To come back to a word I use on this show a lot, Tucker, nobody understands what is seemly anymore. If you have to explain to the FBI director why his wife shouldn't be out shrieking in the streets at the Women's March with a bunch of big hats denouncing the president, if you have to explain to the FBI director why that's wrong, that guy shouldn't be FBI director.
Well, I think that, and I just want to be clear, I'm not attacking, and I don't think you are either, Comey's wife or her right to express her political views. That's great. I just don't think you can, with a straight face, say, I'm a totally nonpartisan FBI director when your whole family is marching against your boss on his first day of work. I mean, I just don't believe it. We're going to have more with Mark Steyn, because we can't get enough, and we don't think you can either. He's going to respond to a Chick-fil-A controversy, which is kind of interesting at the end of the show. We'll be right back. But first, Philippe Reines is a former advisor to Hillary Clinton who believes her campaign was hamstrung by none other than James Comey. Philippe, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So when you see Comey basically exposing himself as a Hillary Clinton fanboy, do you feel better? Do you think, actually, I miscalled this, he did love us, he didn't mean to hurt us?
Jim Comey was part of the Whitewater investigation that led to the Monica Lewinsky. Jim Comey investigated Bill Clinton in 2002. I think fanboys probably a little bit.
And then he said the Mark Rich case, where President Clinton, whatever, he's many good points. He did sell a presidential pardon to a fugitive felon hiding in Switzerland. And Comey's like, it doesn't really tell us anything about the Clintons that he would do that. Really?
I don't think looking at his past, you can say anything other than he's a diehard Republican. He was picked by George Bush to be the FBI director. He was unanimously picked and confirmed by a majority in the Senate.
That's all true. That is all true. But when you watch this interview, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right.
His daughters, who are women, who voted and walked in the march.
Right, but I don't.
As did Jared Kushner's brother. I don't know that means that Jared is against his father-in-law.
And John Kasich is a diehard Republican, and so is Nikki Haley. But there are distinctions among Republicans, and this is a guy who has strong political beliefs, and they sort of emerged during the course of this 5-hour interview in an unmistakable way. He prefers Hillary to Trump. There's no way you can reach another conclusion.
I think if that was true, she'd be president right now.
Really?
I do.
Or maybe you could flip it around and say if it weren't true, she would have been indicted.
No, because the part of indicting going forward, I mean, there have been other investigations and there have been multiple looking at what she did. But what he did, what he came forward on July 5th and then later on October 28th, was so outside the norm of the protocols in place for the FBI director, so that we don't have another J. Edgar Hoover, who for 50 years bullied and blackmailed our presidents. So it's impossible to think that he in any way was helping Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think he wanted to, and I have said many times to you and
I think
others,
it's not
agree.
clear what Jim Comey wanted.
Well, here's the most remarkable part of the interview to me, where he said to George Stephanopoulos, I never heard Donald Trump criticize Vladimir Putin in private, and held that up as evidence that somehow the president did something wrong. Are we now required in our private conversations to criticize Vladimir Putin, or else we'll fall under suspicion of law enforcement?
Well, I think you're seeing with Jim Comey what Jim Comey does best. He likes being in the spotlight. He likes being the victim and the hero. He's clearly venting about his time at the FBI and under President Trump and being fired. You can debate about whether private conversations, whether about Putin or not, were appropriate to be disclosing. But if you set aside, and I know this is a little convoluted, but there's Jim Comey, the man who had his actions and did things that really call his judgment into question. Then you have the Jim Comey who rationalizes why he does things. And
I think that's right. No, I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I just want to know what the standard is.
But I think it doesn't undermine everything he's done. And more importantly, he's been gone for a year.
That's true. But
he's no longer driving the train.
But he says this, and I thought actually Stephanopoulos did a pretty good job in the interview, but I was sort of struck that he didn't respond when Comey said, worst of all, he never criticized Vladimir Putin. So watching everything that's happening around us, I wonder, is that still okay? Is it okay? Can you be a good American and not criticize Vladimir Putin in your private life?
It wasn't a private life. They were in the Oval Office.
No, but it's
intelligence.
It's just a conversation.
They were talking about Russia's meddling in the election. I know you and I have different opinions of that, but it would be the time for someone to say, I want to get to this Russia part. I think he was shorthanding Putin. And maybe, again, he shouldn't talk about private conversations. But his point is that Donald Trump wasn't taking much of an interest or concern with the Russian attacks on our system.
Well,
I think that was his larger point.
I'm not either. I'm actually not concerned by that. I think it's like number 1,100 on our list of things to worry about. But I still think I'm a good American who cares about the country. And I guess I just don't want to live in a McCarthyite world where you're judged by the things that you don't say and your loyalty's impugned.
Well, some would argue that a McCarthyite world is asking your FBI director for loyalty.
Yeah, well, he didn't get it. Philippe, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I like the glasses, by the way. Well, Stormy Daniels took advantage of a media horde today in New York. We'll have that, plus Sean Hannity's response to the new revelations about attorney Michael Cohen.